10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff and the clock is starting.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It's our small step into the giant leap we call Episode 7. Jebediah takes Manhattan.
Oh, and it stinks in here.
I'm your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot, Biff Aldrin, and with us as always, our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Tromo.
Coming up in today's program, we'll update you on our progress within the game.
We read your letters in the crew report.
We'll also have the latest news in this week's mission briefing.
Another episode of
As the Kerbin Turns.
We also do our But I Digress segment where we talk about non-Kerbal things. This week it's Red Planet
By request. A reminder, if you would like to get in touch with us, as always, you can contact us by email. That's kerbalpodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter
at Kerbalcast.
Well, let's go ahead and start out with the progress report. I have a lot of progress to report, but I want to hear yours first.
Okay, actually, my progress is a little bit different this week. Some of the hours I got, I didn't log in my game. I actually was over at a friend's house, and he had gotten the game on the Steam sale.
Oh, okay.
And he said...
You lost me for a second.
I actually went in on your game and started deleting things. That was my progress.
I wondered what happened.
You know, I just take you down a notch, and, you know, I'm king of the hill on a pile of crap.
See, I thought, because Kerbin disappeared in my game, and I thought it was like the Death Star, but you just went in and deleted it.
No, it's the Mun base mission, where you start on the Mun, and all you have is nothing but, like, cargo pods.
You know, the power to destroy an entire planet is insignificant compared to the Force.
It's like 1,000 Kerbals just cried out.
Yeah,
anyway.
for us to continue.
Yeah.
Quit messing around.
Okay, so I had a couple friends that had gotten it on the Steam sale, and one of them, he wanted me to run him through the game. And we were playing, and, you know, I said, okay, he said he wanted to start off in career mode. So the first thing we did is I was like, okay, now just click a pod in, you know, the vehicle construction. He clicks that, and he's like, okay, what next? And I said, now launch it. He's like, what? And I said, just launch it. And so, like, we launch it, and it's just sitting there. And I said, okay, get out, surface sample, EVA, you know, all those things.
Question.
Yes.
When he launched, were you playing Diarrhea Planet?
Well, it's his game. You got to let him. You got to let him choose.
If you haven't heard the last two podcasts, Nos says that when he launches, he likes to listen to a band called Diarrhea Planet.
It's a good band. It's a good band. So I had him get out and do his EVA and everything. And he said, how was I supposed to know that? I said, trial and error, frustration. And that really drives home something like contracts. Because,
you know,
like,
I heard that was the original title of the game.
What?
Trial and error and frustration.
So, you know, it drives home the importance of contracts. So they could have a contract whenever they introduce contracts and budgeting. They could have a contract, soil sample of the launch pad. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, how am I supposed to get that? And then eventually you find out to click EVA, and you EVA, and, like, you get a soil sample. So it would kind of open up that area of thinking that player didn't have originally. Like, that player's first instinct wasn't, okay, I'm going to go get soil samples from all over Kerbin. That'll give me the science in order to go to the moon. The first thing you think of is, I have rockets, I launch them.
Right.
That's it. Like, you don't think of anything about the planet you're on. You think about leaving the planet you're on and going and doing stuff. So I, you know, had to build in show them hey, these are all the things you can do on the planet in order to get the science to eventually get the things that'll help you get off the planet a whole lot more efficiently.
The first time you right-clicked on something and got a menu, did you start right-clicking on everything in sight?
Yeah. And anytime it gave me information, I was like, oh, okay. Oh, I can check.
I can do that.
Yeah, that's how much energy's on that. And then when everything had buttons, I was like, I right-clicked on the pod, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
okay. So I think contracts will help steer new players, because
some of the controls in the capsule you can actually manipulate.
Like which controls?
Like you can do the throttle. You can control that. There's a couple of buttons.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to look at it to tell you for sure, but I know that you can adjust the throttle while you're. I mean, if you people have done this. I've never done it, but there are some people that have literally done missions where they sit inside the capsule, or they land inside the landing capsule.
Yeah, from their perspective. Yeah, man.
I can't do it because my field of vision is so narrow.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm not no.
That's like master chess player skill set.
That's crazy stuff. And a thing he got a kick out of is like, okay, you got all that science, return it. Now go again. And I said, just with the pod. And I said, now you need to get it from the grass. And he's like, do I have to walk all the way over there? Because these guys move so slow. I was like, no. I said, just start messing with the flight controls. And so he got the pod rolling.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and if you get that thing rolling, you can travel faster than you can walk. So, I mean, if you want to make it to the hill, and it's like, it's a little ways to the hill.
I'm looking for my missing piece.
Yeah, just keep on rolling. Just keep on rolling, and it's faster than walking.
I don't know your friend, but this guy sounds like the laziest person on the planet. Do I have to walk over there?
What? No.
He's in the video. The video game guy has to walk.
You're the guy. You're the same guy who told me that you kept crashing your Kerbals using their jetpacks to get them to walk faster.
Well, that's different.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's different because it's me.
Oh, okay.
Don't you understand?
Okay.
The rules do not apply equally.
But they do walk really slow. They got tiny little legs.
Now, what I was talking about is like on the Mun, if I was a distance away from something, I would engage the jetpack to try and speed up, and I would splat into the surface and slide.
Yeah.
And if you do that too much, eventually you'll splat and die.
Yeah.
And then it's like, God damn it.
You're just trying to save a little bit. Like, you just get a command pod and just roll it. Like, that thing rolls so fast.
You know what else is what is really defeats the purpose?
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get so much momentum going that when you do splat and start to slide, you'll slide right past whatever it is you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And then you're just sitting there waiting for the momentum to go down, and you end up on the other side of it, further away than when you started. You're like, well, this isn't working very well.
And then I had another little bit of time around the game, but not playing the game myself, and that was actually I was watching you dock to giant monstrosities.
That's right.
Yeah, that was, man. There's a lot to it. I haven't gotten that yet, but it was crazy.
Yeah, that's part of my progress report.
And then my own personal gameplay was I did the mission you talked about last time, where you just launch that thing straight at the sun. Mm-hmm. And the first time I made the mistake, it was night, and so I wasn't headed toward the sun. I realized halfway through, I was like, wait, oh.
Now, technically, what I said was you leave the Kerbin system orbit, not the sun.
Yeah, you weren't going straight for the sun.
Right.
And I broke orbit and had my own orbit around the sun instead of just around Kerbin. And that was pretty cool, and I got a lot of science. I did not realize how massive your rocket needed to be, or at least the way I was building it, it had to be pretty huge because I ended up running out of fuel on the way back. So I'm going to try it again, but I got a lot of science transmitted at 100%, so I was able to do that, but there's still like probably around 3 to 450 in science that was left on my pods.
Okay. There's this is a good place to throw this in. There's a tip that I came across several months back, but apparently if you go into orbit around the sun and do a science reading, it is some massive amount.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but I mean, it is like the most science you can get all at once in the game. But obviously you have to bring it back. You can't transmit it.
So it's like if you're in a close orbit around the sun?
I don't know if it's a close orbit, but in an orbit around the sun.
Okay.
And I mean, and technically, if you're between planets, that's considered by the sun.
Yeah.
It has to be an orbit that is, in other words, there's no planet between you and the sun. You have to be as close to the sun as you can get without exploding.
The closest orbiting object to the sun.
Yeah. But yeah, and I can't remember because it's been some time, but you get massive amounts of science that way.
Yeah.
I know this makes me sound like an idiot, but it took me a long time before I noticed that there was a difference between transmitted science and science that you take back.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading that somewhere. They said, oh, yeah, you get tons of science if you orbit the sun. So I went and I was doing like this orbit of the sun, and then it was like 100 science. And I was going, well, that wasn't that much.
Yeah, but if you would have brought it home, it would have been like 490 or something.
Well, honestly, I think it's like in excess of 1,000 or more.
Yeah.
It's just some massive number. But that's another trick. If you'll get in an orbit around the sun. Now, getting in an orbit around the sun, that's a whole different beast entirely.
Yeah.
Because that's not easy.
All of my science said that I was in high orbit around the sun.
Yeah.
So I guess if you get low orbit around the sun, that's when everything starts to get a little wacky.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and you can get different levels of science, like if you're orbiting a planet. You can get one science reading high above Duna. Then if you get close, you can get another reading near Duna. So there's different biomes give you different science.
Yeah.
So what's your progress on Rendezvous?
I actually had some fun with Rendezvous, trying to rendezvous my craft back with Kerbin from the Sun mission. I didn't do much with Rendezvous this week because, I've had a couple other side things I've been working on. Like I was telling you earlier, I was in a board game design competition, so I was working on that. So that was kind of that ate up my allotted free time. But my other time was helping a couple friends with questions on it. They said they just started listening to us, and he was like, yeah. And so I'd bring up something, and I'd be like, yeah, and then you try to do this. He's like, oh, like you said, like you were talking with the Fowler guy in episode 2. And I was like, yeah, exactly. So just so you know, we're an educational program.
At least that's what we claim.
Yeah. That'll get us a government grant and then a cut.
Yeah.
So,
actually, I think the educational value of this program is like mothers play us for their kids, and they go, see, you could end up like those two.
Yeah. Well, we have diminishing returns.
That's right.
See, there's actually a lot here, but once we transmit it, you guys don't get as much.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're in here in the room, you'd be like, oh, it's just so enriching.
One thing I'm curious about, you mentioned that you watched me rendezvous and dock, the two gigantic craft.
Yeah.
Did watching me do a rendezvous and a dock, did a light bulb click on in your head? Did that make it make more sense?
With the RCS and stuff, yeah. See, that was another thing. The reason that Sun mission was so vital is because it got me solar panels, and it got me RCS. It gave me a boatload of science to do that with.
There's a certain irony that the Sun mission got you solar panels.
Yeah. That's where I found them.
Okay. Just orbiting the sun.
Yeah, I just pulled them out of there. I was that's where they come out.
I usually pull my stuff out of a different location, but go ahead.
But yeah, so it gave me a bunch of new items that I could use with it. It gave the solar panels. So I usually do it with probes. I usually don't send crew up there, to enjoy that misery. So I send probes, and they eat up a lot of electricity. So with solar panels, I can sort of recoup that loss. Yeah. And then it gave me RCS, which will help me with the minor adjustment, which was something I wasn't doing yet. The level at which you were doing it was very intimidating looking, but I could see on a smaller level, doing two smaller craft, I don't think would look as I think it is definitely looks less daunting than it did before.
Remember, I told you that what I was doing was almost unnecessarily complex. I was trying to dock. I created in the game, I call them super tankers, and these things are massive, and they have 4 docking ports, and they are arranged in a square pattern. And what I was trying to do was I was trying to dock one super tanker with another, which means that my rendezvous point was off center. It wasn't, you know how normally when you dock a craft, you're trying to dock the center point to something. What I was actually, in this case, what I was actually trying to do was trying to dock something that was off center. And the mass of it was such that it was very difficult to make any kind of quick movements. So everything I did had to be real slow and deliberate.
Now, the kind of a question I had, I didn't ask you whenever I was watching you doing it, is, was there a reason for having 4, or was it just for symmetry's sake? Symmetry's sake.
The reason is because the way I built it is there's a center fuel tank.
Yeah.
And then I have the 4 mounting brackets, the decouplers.
Yeah.
And I've got it in symmetry mode, the 4 symmetry mode.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 4 tanks arranged around the center tank. And what I do is I've got the probe is on top of the center tank.
Oh, okay.
And that's why I put all of the docking hatches on the 4 tanks that are off to the side.
And you have fuel lines connecting all of them to like transfer the fuel?
No, the you don't actually have to do that with the decouplers and things. They actually pass through fuel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and if you'll look, every part has a description.
Yeah.
It'll tell you if it doesn't do a fuel pass through. But,
okay.
But like if you put two tanks together, or if you put two tanks together with a decoupler, it will actually pass fuel through it.
Wait, so what do the fuel lines do then?
The fuel lines automatically pass fuel through it. If, for example, I did a fuel line from the center tank to all of the external tanks, the center tank would automatically drain into the other tanks.
Oh, okay.
And the other tanks would not drain until the center tank was dry.
So it's like just kind of like a straw instead of a valve?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah, you know what? That's a very good analogy. You made it very clear. Okay, so was that your progress?
That was my progress.
Okay, well, I have to talk about mine because I'm proud of this. I told in the last podcast, I mentioned that I was trying to get to Duna.
Yeah.
And what I had done was I constructed some tankers, and I put a tanker in Kerbin orbit, I put a tanker in Mun orbit, and then I put one in Minmus orbit. And I put one in Duna orbit, but by the time I got there, I had eaten up so much fuel that it was pretty much worthless. So that's when I went back and created the super tanker, which was massive. Did I tell you the part count on this thing? It was about 1,300.
Oh, man. Okay.
Oh, it was massive. Massive. And
Yeah.
when I launched, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3.
Wow.
But here's the weird thing is by the time the first stage had expended, I was completely out of the atmosphere. And I was trucking along about 400 or 500 meters per second.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was all on the first stage. So, I mean, somehow or the other, I got the thrust to weight ratio just right.
Man.
But I built this giant super tanker, and I took it to Duna orbit, and I got there with full tanks. So it was in really good shape. So anyway, I had a line of tankers, and so I launched my manned ship, went into Kerbin orbit, refueled, went into Mun orbit, refueled, went to Minmus, refueled, left the Kerbin system, got into orbit around the sun. Once I got to Duna, then I got captured by its gravity, came in, got into an orbit around Duna, refueled again, went down, landed, got all my science, went back up to the tanker, refueled, and I actually decoupled one of the tanks. And on the nose of my capsule was this gigantic fuel tank. And what I would do is I would just burn and burn and burn,
Yeah.
and then I would transfer fuel out of the tank,
It's like,
and then burn some more, and then transfer fuel out of the tank. And I got all the way back to Kerbin, got into Kerbin orbit, deorbited, landed, and
you forgot the parachute.
Oh, that would have been the perfect end of this story.
Yeah.
Of course, I wouldn't. Honestly, they would have found me like a day later hanging from the noose.
Yeah.
Like from the ceiling, with like a sign.
Yeah, I forgot the
forgot
parachute.
the parachutes again. But I got back, landed, and the science I got out of that one mission was about 1,000.
Wow.
It was really nice. And what I decided was I'm going to make a shot for Eve.
Yeah.
And so I did pretty much the same thing. The difference is, and I did get to Eve and back, but here's a critical difference. Whereas I landed on Duna, I did not land on Eve. I got all of my science in orbit.
Oh, okay.
The reason is, when I was captured by Eve's gravity, and I started closing my orbital loop, the supertanker that I had parked in orbit there, the orbit that I ended up with for my craft was at almost exactly a 90-degree angle off of the orbit of the supertanker.
Perpendicular orbit.
Yeah.
I've had that.
So my orbit only intersected the supertanker orbit at 2 points. So by the time I got my orbit matching the supertanker orbit, I had expended so much fuel. I even ended up expending my descent stage fuel was expended as well. So by the time I actually docked with the tanker,
It was get home fuel.
Well, yeah, all I had left at that point was my capsule, my service module, and my engine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, I wasn't landing on anything.
Yeah.
So I did the same thing, which was I decoupled a tank and returned back to Kerbin. On that one, I got about 450 science. But I am in the process where I left it last night. I had just parked a super tanker I had just left the Kerbin system, and when I pick up the game, I'm going to put the super tanker in Eve orbit and then try and do it again.
Now, in preparation, like learning from last time, is there anything you have to do different to avoid a perpendicular orbit?
That is a good question, and I would love it if somebody could answer that, because I have not figured out yet
how that happened.
Well, I haven't figured out yet how to determine the orbit that you're going to get when you enter a different system. What I've been doing to this point is simply making my orbit intersect with whatever system it is to where I have an encounter, like an Eve encounter, and then I'll deorbit, and that's when I discover what kind of an orbit I've got. So if somebody has any advice as to how to do that, I would love to hear, because I won't say that I was sucking on fumes when I got to the rendezvous and dock point. By the time I'd matched up orbits and I was trying to rendezvous and dock, I wasn't sucking on fumes, but I was at a point where I had no margin for error. I had to do everything exactly right to rendezvous and dock. I could not waste one drop of fuel.
Yeah, if you didn't get it right, it was done.
Yeah.
Oh, there was I got to experience the new player, the guy that I was showing the game.
Right.
I experienced his first explosion, and I was there to witness. He had actually unlocked a couple different things, and he was doing pretty well. And at one point, he didn't wait for one stage to finish, and he hit the next one.
Yeah.
But it was
that's everybody does that.
Yeah, you just you anticipate it too quickly, and so you just get an extra second where it's still going.
Or sometimes you get confused and you think the stage is expended.
Yeah. His pod had, so it was basically the rocket, a decoupler, and his pod. Mm-hmm. So the next stage was, he was currently on thrust. Next stage was decouple, and then it was his pod, and then to get the parachute. Well, he also had those like mini propulsion engines on it, and so he hit it, and the thing shot straight up in the air, and then got hit by its own rocket and exploded. I was proud of him. Yeah, I was like, that's the Kerbal spirit right there. It was glorious. That's
like one of those that you can file under never would happen again if you tried.
Yeah, it's like everybody has that first one. You're like, oh
yeah.
Well, okay, that's not happening again.
Well, I guess that wraps. Whoa,
you doing okay?
I guess I'm having a little trouble here. Actually, this would be a good time for this. You know how we have in the game you can put in mech Jeb, and it'll fly for you. Well, I actually had a friend of mine create a program for the podcast called Mech Biff, and we took some audio from the last podcast and tried to see how Mech Biff would handle it.
I started running into a new problem.
Right.
The original problem was I just didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
The new problem is I still don't know what I'm doing.
That's funny.
While they were up there, I'd make an adjustment here, make an adjustment there. I was switching between crafts.
There you go.
And then I would need to get them to get closer to each other.
Right.
One's at a larger orbit, so I need to get the one in the shorter orbit to catch up.
Right.
And, they were crossing at points.
Right.
So I would fast forward.
There you go.
Well, I left on something.
Okay.
I left the light on.
That's funny.
So by the time I got to them, they'd both completely died.
Right.
What do you think? Doesn't that sound exactly like me? I mean, I say right, and there you go a lot.
Yeah, it works pretty well. I gotta ask though, what if I'm having a bad night?
Oh, I had my friend do Mech Nos.
Diarrhea Planet.
See, doesn't that sound exactly like you?
He's got good taste.
Yeah,
he's got good taste in music.
You know what tickles me is 2 episodes ago when you first mentioned Diarrhea Planet.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, you're beginning to wish you hadn't now, probably. You made the comment at the time. You said that this is probably the closest they'll ever get to being mentioned on air.
Yeah.
Well, 3 episodes later, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah, so maybe I was wrong, and we're their big break. We'll try to have them on the show sometime.
Yeah. See, I think this was your secret plan all along.
Yeah, Diarrhea Planet Cast is where we're going.
You there you go.
Right. And now your letters in this week's crew report. First one from Dingo8MBB. Dingo ate my baby.
Dingo ate my baby.
This is in response to parachutes. After being repacked, the parachutes appear like they can deploy a second time by hitting the spacebar, but they won't. I suggest an action group to deploy chutes. This works even after repacking.
Yeah, what he's talking about is that if you deploy a chute and then repack it, you can't hit the spacebar and they'll deploy again. The action group is something that you do in vehicle construction. You know how there's 3 green tabs at the top of your screen? The middle tab is where you do your construction. If you click the left tab, that brings up your action groups.
Okay.
And you can assign different actions to different number keys.
So after repacking it, the action group will work even though the
Well,
staging
yeah,
won't?
what you do is you like you can create for like let's say your number 1 key, you can create an action group that says deploy chutes. After you've fired your chutes with the spacebar and then repack them, you can't refire them with the spacebar. But what you can do is when you need to, hit the 1 key and it'll deploy the chutes.
Yeah, because that its little icon is left staging, so it couldn't be restaged.
I'll do action groups, for example, turn on and off RCS.
Okay.
Because for example, there are times when I want certain RCS ports to be disabled while others are working. To conserve fuel in different places.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll create an action group where I'll turn off certain RCS ports. But yeah, you can do that. Again, it's the left tab, and you do it during vehicle construction.
The other part to his letter is in response to our question of the week, which was they had the World Cup mod that Squad made, and they asked what other mods should be made. He says, additional Squad mods. They should celebrate your 10th episode by releasing a Kerbal Podcast MP3 player part to attach to your ship. This part will stream your shows so we could listen while we fly.
Do you know what I would like for Squad to add to the game?
Like for like our 10th episode?
I'd love it if they would add 2 Kerbal knots, one called Biff and one called Nos. And the stats for Biff would be like 100% stupidity, like -10 courage, and like 150% repulsive to women.
I think if mine could get, I'm going to say the stupidity is pretty high. Give me a little bit of courage and some podcasting headphones.
Podcasting headphones?
Yeah, like some headphones, because we do the podcast. Get some headphones,
Yeah, and you'd be rocking out. You'd be rocking in orbit. Okay, well, let's move on. Our next letter comes to us from Jim3535. And this is a cool story. He says, I wanted to share a few experiences related to one of the podcast suggestions. I recently started a new career mode save that I dubbed No Takebacks. The idea being that I would not revert or quick load no matter what happens. Rocket falling over on the launch pad? Too bad. Try to save it.
No.
You're not there yet, huh? He says that actually made for... I hit the mic again.
Hey, it's the mic hit. Yeah, it's the mic hit.
Woohoo! Every time. Every episode, I hit the mic at some point.
The hidden mic hit.
Yeah. There's some guy out there named Mike going, what? I didn't do anything. He says that actually made for an interesting flight and a bit of Kerbin science rather than the planned mission. My 3rd or so manned flight in, I decided to try your technique of flying just outside of Kerbin's sphere of influence to collect mad science, yo, before returning. It sounded he didn't say yo. He did say mad science, but not yo.
Oh.
It sounded easy and probably should have been. Unfortunately, while burning back towards Kerbin, I missed.
Oh.
That should sound familiar.
Yeah, that is actually very familiar.
And I ran out of fuel before I could correct once I re-entered Kerbin's sphere of influence. Jeb was screwed. His only course of action was to EVA and use his RCS pack to try to get into a stable orbit. This worked, but it was a highly eccentric orbit. He says it took 5 rescue missions to rendezvous because my ships kept running out of power or fuel. This was very early in the tech tree, and I didn't have solar panels at the time. My experience playing in this mode has been quite challenging and rewarding. In other saves, I had normally quick-loaded or reverted after disaster. The art of the rescue mission was something that I had been missing. Combined with the Final Frontier mod that tracks your Kerbal's achievements, it's a cool combination. You know, he's talking about it took him 5 rescue missions. When you get an eccentric orbit like what he's talking about, very difficult to match those. And that's why...
What exactly is an eccentric orbit?
Eccentric, or you remember I described earlier, instead of like a circular orbit, an oval orbit?
Yeah.
And and I also talked about coming into Eve, and my ship was perpendicular to the other craft. That, in relation to something else, that's what you can call an eccentric orbit.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, that's a great letter. That's Jim3535. And Jim, thanks for writing in. Now we're going to get into mod statistics, which was something we just kind of threw out last week. And boy, did we get response.
Okay, so last week we talked about the modder Majir, Majiir. He has made multiple mods like KAS and a couple others. He's kind of known in the community. He released a mod called Mod Statistics. And what it does is it sends info back to his servers about playtime and just a small, seemingly harmless information about time and crashes spent in the game. Now, the problem that was rising is that it was thought and eventually kind of proven that Mod Statistics is actually piggybacked in some of his other mods. So you would download a mod, and that would be in the background running, sending him information.
Yeah, a lot of people were installing it and not realizing it.
Yeah, it was the big problem was it was opt-out, and the only way you could remove it is by going and finding the file and removing it, which could get progressively harder if he hides it further into the code. So only people competent in coding and programming would be able to remove it.
Well, we talked about this last week, and we asked for your opinions. Our first response came from regular contributor Run Phil Run. What did he say?
He said, Kerbal Space Program already logs data and generates crash reports with a pop-up asking you whether or not to send that data to squad. I don't know what kind of data is in those reports, but I have a feeling that it is where the idea behind Mod Statistics originates. From what I understand, Mod Statistics gathers information similar to regular crash jumps, but for mods. This could be very useful for mod devs, just like it helps the guys at Squad. Mod Statistics might also be useful for multiplayer servers, allowing them to check for mod compatibility. However, I do agree with your unease over the opt-out methods and mods including Mod Statistics unannounced. While this data is harmless, the consumer has a right to know it is being logged and distributed and where the data goes, especially if it is done automatically.
Yeah, I said this last week, I'll say it again. I don't like automatic opt-in. When and you run into this with all kinds of stuff. If you try and install something, a lot of times it'll say install using recommended settings. I never do that. And the reason is a lot of times if you do install using the recommended settings, you end up with toolbars and it installs all this stuff, and it doesn't tell you up front that it's going to install all this stuff.
Yeah, they recommend that you get all of those things you don't want.
Yeah, and it's like, no thank you. I have one thing that I want to install, and I don't want to install the other 5 things that you've attached to this. And apparently that opinion is shared among many of our listeners. From Garrett Clark, he writes, quote, "This mod is spyware. Automatically opt in the end user, difficult to find the option to opt out, bundled as a dependency for Kethane and likely for KAS, since Majir is a plug-in maintainer for that mod too, and harvesting data with the potential for the end user to be completely unaware of what was taken and there's no other word for what it does other than spyware. What use can he possibly have for that data? He doesn't work for Squad or handle any of their crash logs. He has no use for it other than his own personal gratification."
And our last letter is from Jacob. I'm a programmer myself, and I am concerned about Mod Statistics. Although the creator of the mod doesn't think it can be used maliciously, I believe with a few modifications to the code could allow someone to get your credit card info. If you have the version from their website, he says he's not sure if it happens with Steam, you know that when you update the game, it warns you that your credit card info is exposed for a short period. It's like a handshaking period. So someone could make the mod trick the game to trying to update, causing it to expose the credit card info, which the mod can then send to a website or email. I'm not positive about everything's feasibility, but it kind of scares me with the possibility.
Yeah, and that's consistently what we heard. I don't think most people are happy about the automatic opt-in.
Yeah, and it's being attached to other mods with, whether or not it says it's in there. I mean, if you're downloading KAS, you want KAS. You didn't want that other mod. Him putting it up as a mod itself and saying, hey, whoever wants to opt into this, who wants to get this mod, that's fine. I mean, if you want to do that, that's okay. But saying, oh, here's this mod, and when you download it, here's another mod, it's just throwing something in there and maybe not even telling you that it introduces kind of a dangerous precedent to where if somebody else could get his mod but get it to get other data and then hide it in theirs, and since it's not from Majir, it's some other guy, you don't know that he has it in there or not, because you don't know if he's the kind of, like if he has his own version of it.
One thing that I do want to toss in is Majir, if you're listening or if you hear about this, we would certainly love to hear from you. We're not trying to attack you or malign you or anything like that. We're simply giving our opinion, and we're giving the opinion of the people that wrote in.
Yeah, and we're more curious than anything.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of open-ended, so if we could hear anything, we'd love to.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you, and I promise you'll get we will fairly read your letter. Again, our email is kerbalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also communicate with us via Twitter.
At Kerbalcast. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to our mission briefing. New Kerbal Guide now available. We want to give a shout out to Fishy Mishy, who has been hard at work for a long time creating a guide to Kerbal Space Program. The ultimate guide, as it is known, is free, and you can get it by searching either Google or Reddit for Kerbal Ultimate Guide. Fishy Mishy is still adding information to the guide. If you'd like to help out, contact him on Reddit. In the meantime, check out Fishy Mishy's Ultimate Kerbal Guide. It's very well done and very appreciated.
Yeah, it is really cool if you've seen it. It's it's got diagrams and charts and pictures, and it's the instruction manual that the game doesn't have but sorely needs.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I'm gonna have to look at it.
Fishy Mishy, you've done a good job, so we're proud of you. Okay, moving on. NASA is requesting the public and interested organizations to review and comment on the agency's proposed Mars 2020 mission, and the comment period runs through July the 21st. The mission would include a mobile science rover based closely on the design of the Curiosity rover, which was launched on November 2011 and is operating successfully on Mars. The mission is planned to launch in July or August 2020 from Florida. And if you want to comment, a couple of websites, obviously nasa.gov is one, or you can go to mars.jpl.nasa.gov/Mars 2020.
Next story is from ScienceNews.org. Something's playing hide and seek in one of the methane seas on Titan, the largest of Saturn's moons. New radar images from the Cassini spacecraft show a bright patch roughly 20 kilometers on a side pop up near the shoreline and then disappear. Planetary scientists think that the mystery blemish may be wind-driven waves, bubbles from the deep or silt-like deposits floating up from the seafloor. Researchers think it may be getting a first peek at seasonal changes as the summer approaches on Titan's northern hemisphere.
I have an explanation.
What is that?
One word. Nessie.
Oh.
Yeah.
So anytime we see it here, it's just a reflection or something.
That's right. Well, it's Nessie's long-lost cousin.
Oh, okay. Okay, have you seen Europa Report?
No.
Okay.
And you've told me repeatedly to see it. I am going to watch it.
I'll have to make it a digress or something because I need you to watch it. And
Okay.
we'll talk about that story again because I'm just saying.
You need me? You know how I've longed to hear you say that.
I don't need to need you, but I need you.
I want you to want me. Okay, our last story actually requires a little bit of music. Are you ready? There we go. We want to wish a happy birthday to the busiest little 1-year-old out there. On Tuesday, June the 24th, 2014, the Curiosity rover completed its first Martian year, 687 Earth days exploring the surface of Mars. One of Curiosity's first major findings after landing on the Red Planet in August 2012 was at its landing site. The rover determined the site was once a lake bed, and if Mars had living organisms, this would have been a good home for them. And that wraps it up for our mission briefing, and you know what that means. And now, another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
Honey, I'm home.
Hello, dear. How was your day?
Oh, same as always. We landed on an alien planet, and a xenomorph burst out of my chest. Say, why is the cat hissing? Is there something behind me?
Tune in next time for another edition of As the Kerbin Turns. Yes! Violence! Violence!
All right.
Woo-hoo!
It's a good one.
That was so much better. The last two have been terrible. I have not liked the last two.
I don't know. I think...
Well, first one was cannibalism, which is just disgusting. And trust me, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
And then last week was like this obscure inside little joke. This time, we're back to blood and guts.
Yeah, I got the blood and guts
yes.
back.
Yes.
Well, you
violence.
know...
Violence.
You got to hit, like, every part of your audience.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And so...
Much like I do the mic. Well, okay, so now we move on to But I Digress, and this is a first for us. This is a But I Digress by request.
Request digress.
But I request digress. This is, we actually had a listener write in, MK3424, and asked us to talk about the movie Red Planet. Red Planet is a movie that I have seen many times. You had never seen it, so you borrowed my copy and watched it.
Yeah, I watched it yesterday.
Okay. Well, I know my opinion. What is yours?
Okay, so Biff and I have known each other for a while, and whenever we first started working together, this story's going to lead somewhere, I promise. He heard that I hadn't watched the movie Blade Runner, and he was like, "I can't believe you haven't watched the movie Blade Runner." And so he had me borrow the movie Blade Runner. Now, I was born in 1987. You were born in 1963. Hey,
yeah.
I was right. I won't remember your birthday. I'll remember that though. And I should have you say your birthday so I remember it.
Me and the Curiosity rover both had birthdays.
Yeah. So he had me watch that, and I came back to him, and he was like, "Well, what did you think? What did you think?" And I said,
"Wasn't it great?"
I said it was okay. And to him, he's like, "What do you mean it was okay? It was mind blowing. It was this." And I said, "I'm watching this post Matrix. I'm watching this post Minority Report, post Inception, all these like reality bending kind of movies, like question stuff kind of movies." And so I have seen it since then, so it didn't have the kind of impact on me that it that it had on Biff.
I hear the same thing. People with the Beatles, people, what's so special about the Beatles?
Yeah, and like at the time you're like, whoa.
It's like, okay, now you have to remember that they did it first. You're hearing it after 40 years of really bad copies.
Yeah, and then you get there. So
you like the Beatles. The Beatles sound like everybody else.
Like, you know what band is really good?
Diarrhea Planet.
Oh, stop it!
It's pretty good.
Mech Biff has something to say to that.
Your mother was a hamster and your father smelt of elderberries.
This is like too much power for one man.
We're uninstalling both of them.
Okay.
I think they're both gone.
Well, let's get back to we're digressing from digressing.
Okay, so I almost said the band. The movie. So I have to take it. I have to put myself in the mindset of the time, and that movie.
You're calling me old, aren't you?
No. For the Blade Runner thing, maybe, but for Red Planet, I have to remember the kind of movies that were out around 2000,
right.
The kind of stuff that people were hitting on concept wise, and
there you go.
And so I just looked at what was this movie when it came out,
right?
And for that, I would say it's pretty good, solid movie, for its time. For right now, I would say that it's a pretty solid, okay movie.
See, I enjoy this movie. I do think one thing that it suffered from at the time was, Hollywood sometimes gets two for disease where they do two movies on the same subject.
Yeah.
It's like right about that time, they did two movies about Wyatt Earp. They did two animated movies about insects. They did A Bug's Life and Ants. Yeah. And then they did two Mars movies. They did Mission to Mars, which came out in March of 2000, and then they did Red Planet, which came out in November of 2000. And here's the thing. Mission to Mars sucked. It was horrible.
I didn't see it.
Count yourself lucky. Seriously, that is,
Man.
I mean, that is, and that's like 2 hours I want back. I remember sitting in the theater. I had a friend with me, And I was sitting there watching it, and, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is this as bad as I really think it is? And about this time, a friend nudges me, and he goes, man, this is bad. And I'm like, okay, it's obviously not just me.
Yeah.
But no, I like Red Planet because, it's a good, solid adventure movie. It's pretty close. They're kind of half and half on the science. They got a lot right. And, of course, they got some stuff wrong.
One thing I thought was cool is that they spent some time on the technical stuff. Like they had long shots of things docking or, like detaching and, like, the mechanical shots. And I know for the time it was partially, like, CG show-off time.
Right.
But they...
See, I sound just like Biff, don't I?
Yeah.
There you go.
It was kind of cool, though, that they had extended shots of just, like, the mechanical maneuvers.
Right. Yeah, I really, like I said, I enjoyed the movie. I wanted to read, I cribbed this as well. This is the description of the movie. The basic plot line is that Earth is dying. Mars is humanity's last hope, so a terraforming project is initiated to make Mars habitable. Low-grade nuclear weapons are detonated at the North Pole of Mars to release the frozen carbon dioxide into the air, which in turn will warm the planet through the greenhouse effect. Then, years later, probes loaded with algae are dropped on the planet, which will hopefully turn the CO2 into breathable oxygen. For reasons unknown, the oxygen levels drop, so a team is sent to Mars to investigate. Then things start falling apart. And that is a bit of an understatement. They get to Mars orbit. There's a huge gamma burst.
Yeah,
it disables the ship.
Yeah, it's like done. The ship is just like, oh, it's done. Ship's done.
I think it's well done.
Yeah, it was. It was so like at the beginning of the movie, you're like, oh, already, okay.
There was the thing I like about the movie is that it really does give you a sense, or at least it gave me a very good sense of, they're explorers on unfamiliar terrain. And, the idea of being able to actually go to Mars and walk around, that's very appealing to me. So to watch a movie that credibly deals with that, and does it in an entertaining fashion, that's the thing I like about it. And also, Val Kilmer he can do one role really well, and then he can do another one where he's just chewing the scenery.
Yeah. Which one was this?
This one was one that I thought he did well.
Okay.
He kept his excesses in check.
Yeah. Well, there was the scene where he was like rocking out or something when they like that was obnoxious. I was like, okay, this just went way like 90s on me.
Well, but you know what? It does tell you this. It tells you that 20 years in the future, people will still be listening to the police.
Oh,
so, Sting will still be getting his royalty check.
Well, there's hope.
Yeah.
There's always hope.
One other thing that I really liked about the movie, when we actually do have people living on the moon and when we actually do have people living on Mars, a lot of the stuff that we have already sent there, for example, I'll concentrate on the moon here. One of these days, the Apollo 11 landing site will have a museum built at that location, and people will go there and they'll be able to look out and see the landing site as it was left by the astronauts. And I suspect that there will be a museum essentially on every Apollo landing site. And one of the things that I liked about this movie was a lot of the way they problem solve is they go and they find things like previous landers and probes that had been left behind. Now, some of it requires you to really stretch your disbelief to buy into it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's conveniently, that's not on the other side of Mars.
Yeah.
It just happens to be a little ways away.
But the Mars Pathfinder mission was still fairly fresh in our memories at the time.
Yeah.
And one of the plot points in the movie that, they need to communicate, and so they go find that old rover, and they communicate. There's a really cool website or a good column. It's called Bad Astronomy, and it's written by a guy named Phil Plait. And he was a big fan of the movie. But he also, Bad Astronomy, they talk about what's good, what's scientifically correct in these movies and what's not. For example, Armageddon, basically nothing.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Other than there's a planet Earth and there are such things as asteroids. But for Red Planet, he said that the movie was pretty close. But the thing that I was talking about, which is them using the Pathfinder rover as a radio, this is what Phil had to say. Quote, in an attempt to communicate with the orbiting mothership, they pull the modem from the Sojourner rover from Pathfinder and use it to radio for help. You can't just pull the modem off the rover, point it up, and hope to get a good signal. After all, the rover's batteries were dead. Also, they disconnected it from the antenna. And it's actually worse than that. The rover radio had a very limited range, about 10 to 20 meters. It was only designed to communicate with the lander, which was why the rover never strayed far from the landing site. Also, the rover radio wasn't designed to transmit voice. It had a limited capacity to send information. And so what you have in the movie is they're literally holding like this modem card they pulled out of the rover, like they're pointing it up in the air and talking into it.
And it becomes a walkie-talkie.
Yeah. And I mean, even at the time, I was thinking, I just don't buy this. But again, I like the movie. I think I was more impressed with it than you were. One last goof, and this doesn't really give anything away, but at one point, they're trying to do CPR on an astronaut, and the onboard AI on the ship says, "Stand him up." They're in zero gravity.
There is no up.
There is no up.
Yeah.
You don't stand somebody up in zero gravity.
At one point, they get on the planet, and one of the guy, there's the pilot, and he's kind of a jerk or whatever, but he's
Benjamin Bratt.
Yeah,
and he was hot with Law and Order at the time.
Yeah, and he gets all sassy with the other dude and starts like talking him down. And they have a fight, and he, the other guy, I don't remember his name. He pushes him off the cliff. Pettingill pushes him off the cliff, and he falls down.
I don't think he pushes. I think he like nudges him or slaps him. Or
yeah. He goes to hit him, and I guess they weren't compensating for the gravity or something, and it was harder than he thought, and so it put him off the cliff. Originally,
when love taps go wrong.
Yeah, it was a deleted scene. There was actually a full fight. And I'm glad they took that fight out because the fight actually makes it look like he was defending himself when he threw him from the cliff. Mm-hmm. So it brings in an interesting precedent. They're on Mars, and when you're in a completely new space that man has never been to before, like humankind's never been to. There's an interesting thing about firsts, and the very first thing he did, like what's the first thing you did on Mars? It's like, well, they were all doing the same thing all the time. And you had the science officer. He was the first one to die on Mars. And then you had the guy that...
Chantillis.
Yeah, he was dying. Like they were all dying.
Chantillis lace. No, sorry. Different song.
Their oxygen was running out, and so they were all going to die. And
that scene is hard for me to watch. Because I mean, and I know that that they're going to pop their helmets open and there's going to be air. Yeah. But I still sit there and just...
Yeah, it's got to be tough. So... you have the guy who ruptured his spleen, and he's going to be the first guy to die on Mars. I mean, so like you get to Mars for the first time, and he's there, and you're first, but you're also first to die. And then Pettingill was the first to kill somebody on Mars, right. Whether or not he wanted to. Like that's what it was. But he only had to live with that for like a minute or two, and they were all going to die anyway.
Yeah.
And then they all live, and so now instead of, well, I'm going to die anyway, now I have to live with what I did.
Yeah, and you can see that guilt just weighs on him, too.
Yeah, and it starts to become, now the only other two people that are around you.
And they were suspicious.
Yeah, they were suspicious because the guy that threw himself off the cliff did not seem like the kind of guy that threw himself off the cliff. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
There's another first that you didn't mention, which is Val Kilmer, whatever his character's name was in the movie. He was the first person on Mars to get an off-the-shelf modem to work.
Oh, yeah. there you go.
Yeah, that was one part. He takes that little communication card out of the rover, and he plugs it into a Russian lander. And, it's like the two just plug right in, and they just immediately start communicating. And I'm just going, man, I wish I had that luck with computer. I mean, I'll go buy stuff from the store that is meant to go together, and it won't work.
Yeah, really, like the CGI level or the depth of the story or anything. All of that was fine with me. That's why I said that the movie's okay to good. Depending on where you push. There's one thing that just really bothered me, and that was it was like.
You're not going to say the music again, are you?
No. It was like high school in space at points, because I mean, really, you watch a lot of other space movies like Sunshine or any of those, and they have a chain of command, and there's always a captain. You always respect that captain. And here, they kind of play fast and loose with it, like they're openly flirty with each other, or
Well, she did step out of the shower naked.
Still, I don't know. They just really play around. It's a bunch of non-professionals that are like they're good at their job, but otherwise they have no sense of professionalism. It was almost like space reality TV. And I was just like, it's kind of hard to believe you'd have a bunch of yahoos in space.
Well, the one thing I had no trouble believing, though,
especially if it's the mission to save humanity.
Yeah, the Tom Sizemore character during one of their conversations at the dinner table basically makes a crack about how he would be the king of Mars, and the mission commander, which is a woman,
his boss,
would be his queen. And then he says, propagation of the species.
Yeah.
And it's like...
The reprimand would be like...
Yeah, but you know what, though? I mean, there's a part of me that kind of feels like I can see somebody making that kind of an absolutely jerk-face comment.
Yeah.
I could see it, and and I like the way that they handled it, because she just basically without a word just gets up and leaves, and he's like, "But it was a joke."
Yeah,
and then later, of course, he says, "I always had a thing for her," and it's like, duh.
Yeah, I just it's the way that they portray a space crew. It just really seems like it's like, if I'm good enough biologist, I can just go into space and have fun.
Well, remember, they also built a still, so
yeah.
All that moonshine whiskey, it diminished their
I don't
their
want,
professionalism.
I don't want this to be a deterrent for sending a digress. Like if there's like a, hey, we want you to watch this movie, it's not going to be us hating on it. I'm just
you hating on it. I like it.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not going to say
I like that movie.
I didn't hate it. I'm just not a wild fan of it.
You're basically saying that you're 10 years too late or so.
Yeah, that's the main part of it. I don't know how old MK3424 is. I don't know when you saw it, but watching it now with everything else that I've seen has a hard time holding up. So just there aren't many movies that really stand that test of time and like hold up in every aspect. So there were a lot of areas where it was really cool and a lot of cool things that it did. But there was just a few things that irked me that if it was done now, you wouldn't have seen those things. What
surprised me, I did some research. Obviously, I'd seen the movie, but I wanted to pull some information about it. Roger Ebert, God rest his soul, actually gave this movie a very good review. And Ebert was kind of hit and miss when it came to science fiction. You never could quite tell if he was going to like something or not, but he actually liked the movie. He and I'll end on this comment. He says that the story's strong point isn't psychological depth or complex relationships, but brainy scientists trying to think their way out of a box that grows smaller every minute. To like that kind of story is to like this kind of movie.
That's probably why I wasn't, because you notice how much I got into Solaris and stuff, and how much, Gravity, and like whenever we talk about those, I was super into them. That actually probably sums up why I wasn't rabid about the movie, because that's probably the wrong mindset is what I went in with.
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think But I Digress, the movies, this is probably the first straight-out action kind of film, action-adventure film that we've really talked about.
Yeah, that's true.
That's not really dealing with a lot of really weighty themes. Again, I think that I'm kind of inclined to like this movie simply because I love the idea of being a pioneer on the Martian surface.
Yeah.
And also, again, going back to what I said earlier, the idea that all of this hardware is just all sitting up there, and one of these days, we're going to go back to it. I hope I live long enough to be able to go to the Apollo 11 museum on the Mars.
Yeah.
On the Mars.
On
the moon.
On the Mars.
On the Mars.
Yeah, like, just, them like, oh, yeah, there's a rover sitting over here. You're like, yeah. And you just really start to think of all the things we've sent there that, are still there.
Yeah. Well, But I Digress is actually in two parts today. And the reason for that is that in addition to the movie we're talking about, Steam had their 2014 summer sale this week, and we sent out a request on Twitter, and we asked, what did you buy during the Steam summer sale? And do you want to read some of the comments?
The first one comes from Javster, who said they bought Spelunky, Civ 5, and I want to buy Far Cry 3 and Space Engineers.
From Silence Murder, Borderlands 2, and Battle Block.
Felix Andrade May, FTL, Stanley Parable, Democracy 3, SimCity 4 Deluxe, Tiny and Big, Grandpa's Leftovers, and that was all by the second day.
Let's see. Arsenio Dev said, I would have bought KSP if I already didn't have 2 copies bought already.
Well, you can never be too sure.
That's true.
So if one crashes, you can just revert to the other one.
I crash a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Geek Furious said, didn't need to buy anything. I already own KSP. What else do I need?
You notice there's kind of a theme here, and that leads us into the last tweet. This is my favorite because we sent out, right before we started recording, we sent out one more tweet and we said, okay, last chance, tell us what you bought on the Steam summer sale. And Nova Cutter wrote back and said, I bought this awesome game called Kerbal Space Program. You guys should try it. It's great. So that's my favorite tweet of all.
I looked it up.
You looked what up?
I looked up the game he's talking about.
Oh, Kerbal Space Program?
Yeah, maybe.
Doesn't sound like our kind of game.
I don't know. If it goes cheap enough, I'll check it out.
So that wraps it up for But I Digress, yes?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So that means we wrap up the program as well. As always, we do want to thank all of our listeners, everybody who has downloaded and listened to the podcast. Also, everybody who took the time to write letters, and that includes our regular contributors. And also, we want to thank the moderators at the subreddits Kerbal Space Program and Kerbal Academy. And I did want to especially thank the moderators for Kerbal Academy because they added a link to us, a permanent link to us on their front page. And so they help promote us, we help promote them. Both of those very good subreddits, Kerbal Space Academy and Kerbal Academy.
We also want to thank the folks at Squad. Thank you for making the game. We really like it. And we want to thank Professor Soap, who provides all the music for our podcast. You can find him Facebook.com/Professor Soap.
And as always, you can contact us by our email account. That's kerbalpodcast@gmail.com. Or on Twitter
at Kerbalcast.
I am Biff Aldrin, your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot. With me, our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Take it away, Mech Biff.
Happy Kerbaling.
Oh, same as always, we landed on an alien planet and a Xenomurphy Brown. I'm back from outer space. I just found you here with that sad look upon your face.
More singing. Oh, God.
What do you know?
What do you know?
What do you know?
Holy crap.
Hey! And now it's time for our crew report where we hear from our viewers. And we're going to
Our viewers?
Our viewers.
People can see us?
With their ears. Their ear balls. If they could see us, we would not have
no listenership.
Yeah. And says, I want to buy Far Cry.
I don't think that's on sale yet. And you know what that means, right?
Well, a mod he recently Reese's peanut butter cups. My W cells are dead.